morning and welcome back to the Closers Inner Circle podcast with your host, Denise Griffitts and Bengay III. We're now on week 11 of our Sales Infiltration Masterclass series, and the momentum just keeps building. Today, we're exploring the chapter that starts on page 257 of the Closers Part 2. It's a powerful section, and Ben always says it's the best chapter he ever wrote, focused on the art of advanced closing and the psychology behind high stakes conversations. And if you've been with us from the start, you already know that each week adds another layer of insight and precision to your sales skills. And you also get to hear some really wonderful stories about from Ben about his lengthy sales Bibles and sales industry mentor. I mean, ask him if he does it. He does it all. So if this is your first time tuning in, welcome aboard. You're absolutely welcome to begin here on part 11, but we also highly recommend checking out weeks 1 through 10 to get to the full scope of what we're building together. And this series unfolds step by step, just like any successful sales process. So in this episode, we'll continue sharpening your sales infiltration abilities, not just the how, but the when, the why, and the deeper strategies that separate the good from the great. This is where confident salespeople transform into master closers. And this is important. We also recommend, in fact, I highly recommend that you have your closers books in front of you as Ben shares his decades of sales wisdom. And by the way, today is World Book Day. I just published a LinkedIn newsletter highlighting a few of my favorite authors. Leading the list is Ben and his legendary mentor, Dr. Napoleon Hill. And I also gave a special mention to Ben's friend, Og Mandino, whose book, The Greatest Salesman in the World, is a timeless classic. It's a short, deeply inspirational book, and it has earned its place as a cornerstone in both personal development and sales literature. Good morning, Ben. Where can our audience go to get their copies of the Closers Part 2 and 1 now that I've nagged them?
Well, and good morning to you. They can go to the best place because it still carries our unconditional lifetime money back guarantee. They're still signed and dated by me, but special pricing and free shipping, which is better than what we offer at my own website. So go to stores, stores dot ebay dot com / this is all one word, sounds like two, but it's not. Ronzoni Books, RONZONEBOOKS. And you can order there, and you'll see a whole bunch of things you probably didn't know that we offer. So it's not just the closers 1 and 2, although that's what I'm most famous for. Others are building their own heritage in the closers. Part 3, 4 is soon to come from Denise Griffitts on podcasting, etc. How to set up a podcast. Part 5 is already there with a heavy emphasis on real estate. Part 6 is just about done, and as is part 7. So my goal is to add quite a few more to the series before I hang it up. And each one is part of the total family and thought process. So I recommend them all, and that's where you go to get them. Then, if you're interested in my mentoring service or coaching, if the way normal people talk, coaching, consulting, and mentoring, I do for others what Dr. Napoleon Hill did for me. In fact, what Dr. Napoleon Hill and I were getting ready to do when he passed, we were opening a company called Mentoring Dynamics, and I was going to do there what I'm still doing now. The difference is 40 years passed in the middle, where I let the idea uh, wither, and we brought it back to life with great success. So if you're interested in that, just shoot me an email to BFG3, that's B as in Ben, F as in Frank, G as in gay, the numeral 3 at DirectCon. That's short for Direct Connect, DirectCon.net. And on the subject line, just put mentoring dynamics or something to do with mentoring, so it'll catch my eye and come directly to me. And we'll send you how the program works, a registration form, no cost, no obligation. And the good news is, if you don't do anything, we won't hound you with phone calls. We'll send it to you. You can either sign up or not. And but we'd love to have you. I always have a few openings for good people on the schedule. So that's how you get the books, and that's how you find out about our mentoring program. And with that, I am at your service.
Oh, you should never tell me that.
I know. As I said it, I thought to myself, boy, that's stupid.
I could see Gigi just raising her eyebrows, going, "Doesn't he learn? What the heck?" I know you've got some questions from people because you always get questions that are amazing and we like to answer them here on the show. But I wanted to talk just really quickly as just kind of a random thought about Augmendino. That book, I don't know why I read it, but I did, and it was a long time ago. But this is why it stood out for me. It's short and it's profound. It's a parable, actually, and it's perfect for daily reflection. And the language is poetic and motivational, and it's spiritual and it's grounded at the same time, making it accessible whether you're in sales, leadership, entrepreneur, or personal growth. It really is a terrific book.
It is, and many people have bought it because they thought it was just a pure sales book. It's a great title for a pure sales book, but it's heavier than that and teaches some great lessons, as did Og himself. He was quite a guy, and I got to know him. We used to do seminars all over the country, big rallies, and also many of the top people that I now get credit for knowing and working with came to us because they wanted to get in front of those rallies and get hired. And I was the president of the company that did that. And that's how I'd heard about him. I'd read the book, but that's how Og wound up standing in my office one day and how we became personal friends. And I told you before the call's over, we can do it now. One of the great things he did for me, he did without realizing it. He literally saved my life. So if we can do that now, if you'd like, I don't want to put a
Yeah,
depressing start on it, but
it's not depressing because it has a good end, but it's important because we are talking about Augmendino, and I referenced him in my, it's World Book Day. There are some
mhm.
books that I just think you ought to be reading. Think and Grow Rich is one of them. The Closers Part Ones and Part One and Two. Definitely, you need to be reading those. And then Augmendino. I mean, I could have gone on and on and on, but I had to, all right, Denise, you can only put so many in here. You're going to bore people to death,
Go
but
over to your bookcase, you'd still be typing.
I would. I really would. And I wanted to list, so many of the people who have been my guests on Your Partner in Success Radio. I just didn't have the room. So I'm going to have to get better about once a month. Here's some books I'm reading. Go. Go get them. But anyway, yeah, tell me the Og story because I've heard it before, but I'm not sure our audience has. And I think it's a critical part of your life.
Well, a critical part of my life, and it's the reason you and I are able to talk today. Minus Augmendino, I wouldn't be part of this conversation. For those who don't know, so we don't have to double back and do it again, Augmendino was an interesting guy with a drinking problem, which he used to talk about openly in seminars, as in not drink too much socially, as in waking up on park benches in parks where he's not sure how he got there. He told me one time he woke up in an alley on his back and without getting too graphic, he'd thrown up on himself, and it must have been around noon because the sun had risen directly above the alley and had hardened the things on his chest, the thing on his chest. He said it was like breaking peanut butter off. And in the meantime, he was making a pretty good living when he was standing up. uh, teaching this. So when he woke up in the alley, he was in a tailor-made three-piece suit covered in vomit. And so when Og would talk to a group about, they say, well, you don't understand. I've had my problems and all. If I was sitting in the room with him, I think, oh no, you've made a tragic mistake in challenging Og about how far down you are versus how far down he was. But anyway, one day talking to him, I had mentioned something about depression, bouts of depression, that I knew more people that were depressed than I thought ever existed. I guess getting the human potential movement opens up your eyes, and probably they were calling out for help for years. I didn't get it, but I had gotten it, and I mentioned that to him. And he said, Ben, let me tell you how, I'm paraphrasing, but let me tell you how low you can go. He said, one day, drunk on a park bench, I woke up and decided that this wasn't the way to live, and I was going to end it all. And I always pictured in like a park, one of those square areas in the middle of a little town, the city park. Um, he said, I look over and there's a pawn shop. And I thought, oh, they pawn guns. I'll go get a gun, come back here, shoot myself, and we're done. Then I won't have to do it at home, assuming he had a home at the time. And so he goes over to the pawn shop and tries to buy a gun to kill himself. The cheapest gun they had was $39, I think it was, which was exactly $39 more than he had. I don't know if he thought they were giving guns away for free, but he didn't have any significant amount of money, least of all $39. So he had to drop his suicide plan.
Oh,
Then fast forward a few weeks or months, he's back in a similar situation. Don't know if it was the same park bench, but drunk in public, woke up, and he said, this time I'm going to do it. And he knew he had the money, probably. So he goes to another pawn shop, asks what their least expensive gun is. Oh, and they said, and do you want a box of bullets or ammunition? And he said, no, does the gun come with any in it? And they said, yeah, it's got 6 in it. He said, oh, that's more than enough. And I guess the person selling him the gun didn't realize the significance of that statement. I only
yeah.
needed
Somebody should have
one.
been listening. Yeah.
Yeah, he should have paid a little more attention. And so anyway, this time he bought the gun and went back to his place where he was going to do it and put the gun in his mouth. And he said, Ben, I tasted defeat. And I said, how does one taste defeat? He said, well, it's the gunmetal, the gun cleaner that the last person who used the gun probably used to clean it. It's the gun residue from having been fired. It's just an interesting mix. And he said, I decided that I had tasted defeat. And I also decided I wasn't going to be defeated. So he said, I put the gun down and decided to go back to being Og Mandino. And I guess what he really meant was become the Og Mandino again that I knew. I didn't know all the dark stuff behind it. And so he did, and became world famous author, speaker, great guy, and was able to draw from his own personal experiences. Fast forward, he had no idea, he was just sharing a story with me. Fast forward a few months or years, I really don't recall, from hearing the story to one day, and I had mentioned briefly earlier in this conversation, Denise, that I have had bouts of depression for, I guess, a chemical imbalance. It's the few that I've had over the years don't have anything to do with what's going on. I've had bouts of depression rich, I've had bouts of depression broke, and in between. So they're not like, oh, this is going to happen. I think I'll have a mental downer. Uh,
Right.
they come without regard to what's going on.
I think
So,
that happens to a lot of people.
oh, sure,
I
far
mean,
more.
I can have depression for about 30 minutes and then I get over it and start laughing at myself. But if it lasts longer than 30 minutes, I worry.
Yeah, and that's how I have gotten through mine over the years. What is this too shall pass.
Hmm.
This isn't the first time it's happened. So in an hour or two, or certainly by tomorrow morning, everything will be fine. And I'll wonder what I was depressed about. But at the moment, it is dead, dead serious. I'll tell you a separate suicide story as soon as I'm through with Og here. So, few months, years, I really don't recall. I'm having a bout of depression, this time with some justification. I'm had left Holiday Magic Cosmetics. The money wasn't coming in over the transom like it used to, and you begin to doubt yourself. Maybe it was just a fluke that I'd been successful in the past, and so on. So, in my office, on top of my big house in Marin County, California, overlooking San Francisco Bay, I decided it was time to end it. So I got out my 357 Magnum and positioned myself so that my wife at the time, the late great Marcia Gay, not Gigi, but a good friend of Gigi's, oddly enough, and got out my gun, positioned myself so that I wouldn't leave a big mess in the office, and so it would go out on the deck, and got ready. Opened up my mouth, put the gun in the barrel in my mouth. Uh, it was cocked, ready to go, and I tasted defeat. As soon as I put the barrel in my mouth, I instantly knew what Og meant when he told me this story. Tasted a taste of defeat and his $39 gun. He even, in a separate conversation we had years later, said, "Thank God it was a used gun. If it were brand new, I might not have had that experience of the gun metal, the gun cleaner, the gun residue, and the smell." He said, "I can still smell what the gun smelled like." So, but I had used mine at a firing range when I got it for different reasons. And so it had all those things on it and around it. And I knew instantly what Og was talking about. And I paused for just a split second, put the gun down on my desk, and went back to being Ben Gay.
Mm,
Thanks to Og Mandino.
that I can't even talk. I'm going to weep all over you.
I appreciate that. The Og was just a wonderful guy. And one of the things he also taught me inadvertently, I don't think we ever discussed it, when you're around Og, no matter how serious the business situation or problem was you were facing or discussing, or suicide, or being a falling down drunk or whatever, Og, on his worst days, oozed a calmness about him. And I learned from that subconsciously. I don't remember him saying, it's important to be calm, but he oozed calmness. And I've tried to bring that into my life too when things aren't going exactly the way I'd planned. Think, well, this too shall pass. Calm yourself. In fact, Gigi has heard that term more than she wants to hear it if she gets upset about something. I subconsciously think of Og Mandino and I say, calm yourself, which, as you know, as a lady, is not a good thing to say to a lady, I've discovered.
No, but I say it to my cats all the time and they don't like it either. It's like,
Yeah.
calm yourself. They're like, nope.
It's
So,
accurate, but it's not a good thing to say.
no, it's not. I say it to myself every once in a while and I'll instantly just say, well, you're not the boss of me. So no, it doesn't work. So I'm having a split argument with myself.
Yeah, well, I've gone to say calm yourself numerous times, hundreds of times, that I was smart enough not to say it. I've sort of learned that that's not an effective technique with a lady who's upset.
No, I'm glad you. I'm glad you're still with us to tell us that because we know that. It's like saying, just if you'll just breathe and take a minute. Oh boy, you just opened a door and you're about to fall down the elevator path, pit or whatever you call it, the shaft. You're done for. But what else? So what happened to Augmentino? I'm not sure I ever know how his life ended.
To
Because I
my
think he
knowledge,
died pretty young, didn't he? Fairly young?
um, if I had to guess, I would say he was in his 60s, but I'm
Right.
guessing because his age, he wasn't so great, so far ahead of me that I was acutely aware. I knew he was older and more mature, but I also balanced that with I was the boss in any
Right.
situation we were in. So with Dr. Hill, I remember clearly I was 25 and he was 84. So because the spread, he biologically could have been my great grandfather. Um, the spread was such that that was not an issue, but something to be aware of in our relationship. With Og, although I was younger, I wasn't so much younger that I was looking for his walker. He was full of life the last time I saw him. We never lived near each other, so I only saw him in hotel rooms. I think he stayed at the house once or twice, but I only saw him in hotel rooms and frequently in the hotel, only on the stage.
Right.
As you know from speaking, there's it's a secret life. People see us on stage, me and whomever, and I think, well, they're the best of buddies, probably came here in a car together and so on. Frequently, the people that you appear with, you don't even get to talk to. You're in the back of the room while they're working and being introduced, and then you're introduced and you go on either immediately or after another speaker or two. And by the time you're on, they're gone. I've had a couple of speakers over the years that I really wanted to meet, but by the time I was on and off, they were at the airport. So it's not, it's, we all know each other's names, but it's not quite the close-knit fraternity you might imagine. And some of that's deliberately. Deliberate. I know several people, know several people who really didn't like the person everybody thought they were buddies with. So it was best to keep them separate. But anyway, with Og, I really don't know. Most of my mentors in the early days, the minimum age spread was 12 years. William Penpatrick, when I joined the company at executive level, of course, he was always 12 years older, but when I was 25, he was 37. And when I was really up and rolling and running the company, I was 30, he was 42. So,
I-
uh,
Those are hard. Those numbers are hard to take. They really are.
yeah,
It's like y'all were just so young.
we were. I look at our boys sometimes and think, I think of you as kids, and I wonder if you get enough rest and so on. And some of them, my oldest boy, Ben the fourth, is 58 or 59 now, and our youngest, uh, the Gigi's biological son, Tony, is 33. Well, I was gone from Holiday Magic for by almost 3 years when I was that age. So I have to remind myself, back off. They are grown people. They don't have to tell you why they came in late. He lives in the guest house behind ours, so I'm aware of his comings and goings.
You
Although
don't
he's
need to give them Easter baskets. They're okay.
no, I remembered that though. This last Easter, I was thinking to myself, should we get him anything? I said, no, no, he's 33.
Right. I remember hearing, and I can't remember whose child this was, but this kid was older, like in their 20s, and the mother was having a little mini argument saying, I, you don't believe in the Easter bunny anymore. Listen to me. You don't believe in Easter bunny. And this child person turned around and looked at his mother and said, but I believe in the Easter basket. So that was the end of that argument.
Yeah.
That was years ago. I don't even know who these people were. They were in a grocery store, but they were arguing over the Easter bunny and the Easter basket. He was very
Mainly the
clear, I
basket.
want the basket.
Yeah. And can I have all chocolate this time?
Right, right. And
Yeah.
don't give me that hollow stuff. Give me a real chocolate.
Well, I said I was going to mention another suicide story. You and I may have discussed this privately, but a gentleman, when I lived in Marin County, on San Francisco was on the other end of the Golden Gate Bridge. I was on the Marin County side, the north end of the Golden Gate Bridge. He had called, and I'd met him somewhere. Nice guy. He had called, and I was supposed to meet with him and maybe do some consulting, but mainly just because he was a nice guy, I agreed to meet with him. So he came over, we met, I gave him some advice. To the best of my knowledge, he followed a good deal of it and went on and was quite successful. One day, several years later, he, unbeknownst to me, is meeting with one of my business partners, Sam Mayo, and they didn't, neither one of them knew that the other one knew me. And somehow in the conversation, Sam Mayo, and by the way, I'm telling you this story because you said somebody should have been aware when
Yeah,
Augmandino only needed one bullet.
right. So that was to me, that was just somebody not listening or not caring.
Yeah, it's one of those ding, 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 ding. We should do something here. But anyway, Sam Mayo was having lunch with this guy on a deal unrelated to me at all. I don't even know what they were discussing. But somehow my name came up. Sam Mayo mentioned it. And this gentleman, not using his name deliberately because I don't know that it's part of his repertoire to talk about his problems, but this gentleman dropped his head, and Sam said, I looked at him, he was crying, tears into his salad plate or whatever. And he said, what's wrong? And this gentleman said, Ben Gay saved my life. And Sam said, how is that? And he told him the story. When Sam told me, that was the first time I knew it. It turns out he had called uh, about a business problem, wanted to come meet with me, and did. And the meeting was successful, and he went on. But what had happened was he had decided to commit suicide, had written the suicide note, had taken some clothes. I don't know why they do this. I helped pick up 14 jumpers off the Golden Gate because, in addition to being in the area with our own boats and driving over it thousands of times and flew under it once,
I know.
the
That's another story. We'll come back to.
yes, another story. But if you're young, you mentioned young. If you're young and stupid, flying into the Golden Gate in a Stearman just seems like the logical thing to do if you're heading back in from doing aerobatics over the ocean. Anyway, this guy wrote his suicide note, got his clothing that I guess he was going to change into and then jump. I don't know how that works, but with the 14 jumpers, there was always something about clothing. They either came off naked or they hit the water so hard it ripped their clothes off, except for the leather belt, or they left it folded neatly on the railing and jumped in their underwear, all sorts of reasons. But he said, I wrote the suicide note, had my clothes folded, and went to meet Ben because I'd promised I would. He said, I didn't have any great hopes, but I'd promised him I'd be there, and I didn't want to call and say, I can't make it. I'm going to commit suicide.
Oh
Uh,
God.
so he came over and we had the meeting. Uh, and he said, I was going to jump on the way back over the Golden Gate, going back towards the city. And he said the meeting went so well and he gave me so much hope, I didn't jump. So he said in so many words what I just said, the reason he and Sam were talking was because, and it wasn't any great wisdom on my part, I didn't sense there was anything wrong. Probably should have, but I didn't. And I just gave him the standard get up off your knees and be a man. You've got more talent than you know type talk. And as a result, he drove back, wadded up his suicide note, threw it away, put his clothes back in the dresser, and then few years later, he's having lunch with Sam Mayo. And so Sam said to me one day, Do you know you saved someone's life? I said, well, in the line of work I'm in, that happens from time to time, but usually I don't hear about it. Tell me your story. And that's when he told me about this guy. So you never know, as Ogmandino didn't know when he told me the gun story. He didn't tell me that to save my life. He told me that because he was open and he would share anything that he thought would be helpful to other people. And so, therefore, when he got up on stage, he had a tremendous power in him because you think to yourself, well, if he'd tell me that, he hadn't got anything else to hide. I assume he's telling me the truth now. And
Right.
then there was that calmness, as I said, that was really great. Got a couple of notes here before we go on with people. Uh, somebody, I think I put this on Facebook and somebody questioned it and they wondered if I was right. The question that I put up was, should top performers be treated differently? And I have a stock answer to that. It can vary. When you're dealing with humans can vary person to person. But yes, and the reason is that's another prize, and it's one you don't have to go buy. You don't have to get a trophy or anything. If you do well, you get other benefits, and it shouldn't be a secret. They shouldn't say, "Oh, he's the teacher's pet." They should know that when and if I do that well, I too will get the following. I had a gentleman who's, I won't use his last name, but his first name was Scott. Last name starts with a W in case he's listening, um, who he worked in one of our telemarketing rooms, outgoing, and with 10 people total most of the time. They came and went, but most of the time there were 10 in there, and he was one of the 10. He sold usually as much as the other 9 did in a month. And so occasionally he would ask if he could come in later than the designated time. I would say, of course. And could he leave earlier? He didn't do that much, or he wouldn't have been selling 10 times as much or as much as 10 other people, but occasionally. And then we discussed what he was best at doing, which was closing sales. Anything else was a waste of his time and energy. He was a professional master closer. I hadn't created the term sales infiltrator yet, but he was sort of a young, full of himself sales infiltrator in the making. So I would give him those privileges, but when anybody raised the slightest issue with it, I'd say, when you're doing what he's doing, you get to come early. You come late. You get to leave early if necessary. Abuse the privilege, I can stop it,
Right.
but that's the reason. And then when we figured out that any time he spent that he wasn't closing sales was a waste, I paid for half. He had to pay the other half of a personal assistant for him whose job was to make his life easier. Get the car filled with gas, go pick up the kids at school or take them to a ball game or whatever. If he just absolutely couldn't do it himself, and uh, go get if he was going to eat at his desk, go get his lunch, and so on. He led a very good life. That's the good news. The bad news is he sat on the phone closing sales for the better part of 8 hours every day. And for some people, that would be horrible, but he was making a tremendous amount of money. Adjusted for inflation, he was knocking on $1 million a year
Mm.
in today's money, sitting on his rear end talking to people, which is what he would have been doing anyway.
Right.
So, to
Right.
answer the question, yes, I do believe in treating winners better or different than the other people on the team, but they should all know why. They shouldn't be bitter. They shouldn't, because he's getting treated specially. They should be happy because now they know how they too can be treated differently. And then, as we're starting down through the list, we did Dr. Napoleon Hill last week and William Penn Patrick, owner of Holiday Magic Cosmetics, and Earl Nightingale and Dr. Nona Vincent Peale. And then today, so far, we've done Ogmandino. Person asked me in casual conversation, why are so many of the people you talk about dead?
Seriously?
Yeah, well, it's a valid question if you don't know any better. That sort of tells
Well,
you how young they are.
yeah, I guess
Uh,
it does. I know you and I know your work and, intimately, and I know so many of the people that have influenced you or that have worked with you or you've hired. Zig Ziglar's one of them. I'm fully aware of all of these people and I know what their general ages were at the time and that most of them are gone. So yeah, I guess it does make sense.
yeah,
But
well, and
that
the
tells
answer,
you that they don't know you very well.
perhaps, that's probably true. Very few people do. You and Gigi are about the only
Oh,
people who have figured out the code.
oh, we
Uh,
do. And we talk about it too.
yeah, I bet you do.
We really don't, but we threaten to.
But anyway, to answer his question directly, I was the young whiz kid. I got started in Holiday Magic and rather quickly became their top distributor, along with my running buddy and business partner, Jimmy Rucker, became their number one distributor after a slow start, 6 months of not making a dime, not profit, not selling a dime worth of
Because
products.
but let's tell why. Because you didn't do what you were told.
Right.
Okay,
I
got that
had
out of the way.
I had successful people all around me who were telling me, "Well, do this, do this." I'm going, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." But I was voted wittiest in my senior class in high school, so I'll do it my way.
Right.
Uh, that was back when, like Willie Loman, I believe, that selling was shine shoes and a haircut. I mean, a handshake and generally nice appearance. I didn't know, I should have known. My father was a top salesman, but he never sat down and said, "Here's how I sell." His was sort of like Rucker. "Oh, watch what I do." And that wouldn't have made him a great sales trainer either. But I was around those people, and the youngest of them was 12 years older than I was. And the oldest, probably, there might have been somebody older I haven't thought of, but the biggest age spread was between me and Dr. Napoleon Hill. When we met, I was roughly 25, and he was
25,
he
yeah.
was 84. As I said earlier, old enough biologically to be my great grandfather. So some with accidents and things. Bill Patrick was killed in a plane crash, but he'd probably be dead by now anyway. He'd be 97 if he were alive. Although he died in his 40s in a plane crash. And the others have gone. Dr. Hill would be 100 and God knows what. He's been gone for 55 years. Earl's been gone. Earl was on the USS Arizona at Pearl Harbor the day I was conceived.
Earl
Uh,
Nightingale.
Earl Nightingale.
Yeah,
And Zig was 18 years older. He was in the Navy. He wasn't at Pearl Harbor, but he was in the Navy the day I was born. So if many of the people I knew were, 60 to 12 years older than I was, it's sort of logical they would be gone by now, or most of them, or retired,
right,
or what
right.
have you. So that's the reason. It's not nostalgia. And my average friends, we've sort of roughly figured out the other day, you got to keep the pipeline full. I don't sit around thinking about the old days without having new days. And the new days, my average friend that I do business with, talk to on a regular basis, mentor, coach, whatever, most of them are in their 40s. Some are older, some are bright enough to acquire help earlier. But I have a whole bunch of people that somebody else will be talking about one day after I'm gone. But that's the answer to the question. And it's an astute question, in my opinion. And then somebody said, "Tell the McDonald's story." I had to, about how quickly somebody can get used to getting free things and get hooked on it. Uh, and I don't know where they heard it the first time, but after questioning them a little bit, I figured out what they were talking about. When young Ben the fourth, was in college up at Chico State, it's about a 2-hour drive from where I'm sitting right now, maybe a little more. And one of the younger boys, I don't, it depended on when I was going, but one of the younger sons would ride up with me to take him to dinner or lunch or whatever. And we would stop about halfway in some little town, I forget which one it was, where there was a McDonald's, and that would be our halfway point, either get a soft drink or something quick to eat or whatever. So we go in there one day, and there's a guy on the way up to see young Ben. There's a guy standing at the counter looking up at the menu, counting his change. He's obviously trying to put together enough for a drink or a sandwich, or I don't know what it was, but there's a look when you're broke, and he had it. So as we were leaving, and he got whatever he was going to order, it was just a drink of some sort. As we were leaving, I'm looking in the where he was sitting. I said to the lady behind the counter, "What's your nicest breakfast or lunch, whatever it was that time of day?" And she told me. I said, "Good. Let me buy that and give it to him. Don't tell him it was from me. And we're leaving. Wait till I backed out." And she said, "Fine." Well, McDonald's uh, used to, now you have to wait like a real restaurant, but used to, you ordered a hamburger, they said thank you and handed it to you. It was ready to go. So we get in the car, and the front of our car is right up against the glass window where this guy is sitting. And she comes over, I recognize her, with this tray loaded with, looked like a good size meal. He looked up with this questioning look, and she pointed right at me through the glass. That was not
Busted.
that was not the plan.
That was not the deal.
So you'll enjoy what you just said in a second. Deal. Um, so anyway, we back out, and I said I wanted it to be anonymous, but it didn't make any difference. He doesn't know who I am, so whatever. Next time we go up, I go up about every 6 weeks. Next time we go up, and I found out in the meantime that whole building across from McDonald's was a hotel that had fallen on hard times and was filled with older people who would have been
Mm,
homeless if they couldn't get a room in that hotel.
right.
And so we walk into McDonald's, part of our traditional stop, and we're second or third in line. I feel this tap on my shoulder, and I turn around, and this guy says, "Same deal." 6 weeks he'd been waiting, but he was
He was
hooked.
so glad to see you drive up.
Yeah, he was hooked on the welfare program. Say
And
that.
I had that word type, when you said we started this story, I wrote down welfare program. Because
Yeah.
listen, I live in the deep South. We have five and six generations who have never gotten away from it. Why should they?
Yeah.
It's too easy.
It's a way of life for some people.
It
I'm
is.
not looking down on them, but that's sort of what happens. And this guy, I'm sure he's gone by now. That was a lot of years ago. But this guy, if I'd been there every day, would have stopped begging and looking for work. Somehow the room was paid for. It didn't look like, I don't know what it cost, but he had found a source of nutrition, and it was
Mm.
named Ben Gay.
Every 6 weeks. I'm glad he didn't starve to death.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's funny. The next time we were up there, I saw him a couple other times over the years and always bought him lunch or dinner, whatever was appropriate. But the next time we were up there, 6 weeks after, same deal, uh, he wasn't there. And I was worried. If Gigi had been with me, she's that type that had gone over to the hotel and asked for him, and
Yep. Knock on doors.
yeah, knock on doors,
Yeah.
bring him down. But I did wonder. I wonder if he's alive. But he was, because I saw him other times. But other times it wasn't the funny humor of same deal. Other times he would make eye contact and sort of nod, like, "I'm here."
Mm.
Good news for you. I'm
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, I'm here and I'm waiting. So don't let me down. Jeez.
And then
Well, I'm glad you were able to help him.
one last one in the sales category. Uh, I had occasion for some reason, but several people wanted to know what my speaking fee was nowadays. And as I was writing out the email form, I thought, well, this will make a good story. So I put it into Facebook also. And under the heading of, there are many ways to say yes. And this story was, person asked me, what's your speaking fee? And I said, well, the all-inclusive fee in the United States is $20,000. And that includes my honorarium, hotel, flights, everything. You don't have anything else to go for. You pay me $20,000, I get on the plane, and I'll spend up to all day with your people. And then there's plan two, if you want to hear it. And he said, yeah, I do. I said, that's $2,950, and we do it by Zoom. And that's based roughly at $300 an hour. It's the same as my coaching fee. So if you're interested in doing that, what we do is you set up a big screen in front of the room, and uh, I do it via Zoom, and then I can even do questions and answers. If you want to swap it to a smaller screen over in the corner, people can come up one at a time. However you want to do it, up to 8 hours. You got 10 hours, but up to 8 that day in that room. And anything left over goes onto your coaching and mentoring log. So 2950, spend it however you want, speaking, consulting, Q&A, whatever. So I said, 20, your choice is therefore 2950 or 20,000. Which one best suits your needs? And he said, duh.
You
So
gave him too many options. You should have given him one.
yeah, well, it was two really,
I
20,000
know.
or
I know.
2950, but duh. And I cracked up. I said, that's the funniest yes I've ever heard. I'm assuming duh means 2950. He said, duh.
He was speechless.
So he saved, I didn't have to travel. People said, well, do you mind losing, it's about an 85% discount. Did you mind losing the 20,000? I said, I didn't have to travel.
You didn't have to go anywhere.
Yeah, and 20,000 is not for the day. The day before you go
Right.
or speak is ruined. The day you're there is tied up, and then you need another day to get home and unwind and dig out from under whatever's happened while you were gone. So 20,000 is a 3-day fee in reality, and 2950, and I don't forget on a plane, not a problem. So I tell you that because it was a funny closing question and answer. And it also, to those listening who might be
Uh-huh.
wanting to ask about mentoring, that gives you some idea of what it is. Want to go back to the list and hit a couple more?
Yeah, I think we've got time. We've got about 10, 15 more minutes. So pick one and
Okay,
start
well,
talking.
we'll do at least one.
Okay.
Doctor on the list that I sent you a long time ago, and people also ask about, is Dr. Maxwell Maltz. He was the author of Psycho-Cybernetics.
Genetics, right. I have that book.
Yeah, and there are 2 or 3 other books in the series. I forget what their names are. Most of them start with psycho. He was on to something. But cybernetics. He, oddly enough, I know for some bizarre reason, I remember he was 66 when we met, and I was 25. But it wasn't a mentoring type relationship. It was he spoke for us in seminars, and I hung out with those people. And in his case, he'd written a book and I hadn't. So that was for me 35, 36 books ago. But then it was 0 to 1 or 2, whatever he had. But the interesting thing about Dr. Maltz and psychocybernetics itself was that he was a plastic surgeon. And the way he stumbled upon the value of psychocybernetics was he saw the change in people in their attitude when they didn't have the big nose they hated all their lives, or the receding chin, or the whatever, maybe something brought on by age or whatever. And he was semi amazed that he would fix the face. I guess he did other things too, but I was zeroed in on faces He would fix the face, and lots of other things would get fixed simultaneously and as a byproduct. And then he realized if you can change, that's a physical thing. But he said there's not a nerve in there where, you cut it and suddenly your attitude is different. It was that they looked better, felt better about themselves, and changed their lives accordingly. And so he coined the term psychocybernetics and turned that into a science of mind type thing. If you can change your thinking or have somebody help change it for you, and almost everybody on my special list of people I've worked with is somebody who helped me change it. They say when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Well, I was ready. Didn't know it in the beginning, but rather quickly I figured out, oh, there is something to this. And then because they were all trying to get on stage in the big seminars and rallies I was running, or we were running, Holiday Magic Cosmetics were running, they came parading through. There isn't a person on that list I sent you, and there's probably 20 or 30 there. And I didn't put on the original list, I had penciled it in on the copy I keep, I didn't put Zig Ziglar or Robert Schuller, the Hour of Power minister at the Garden Grove Community Church, which most people of a certain age used to watch on Sundays, and you've heard him speak and read his book, Tough Times Never Last, but Tough People Do, etc. Every person on that list came into with the exception, I just glanced down at the list, with the exception of Charlie Manson, the warden at
Yeah.
St.
Yeah, he wasn't invited.
Yeah, well, he could have come over, but the warden was a little reluctant to let him drive over to San Rafael to meet me.
Oh
I had to
God.
go to his cell. With the exception of Charlie Manson, every one of these people came to me to get in front of a group of people. Another exception I just noticed, Apollo 15, 16, 17 astronauts. I met them at Cape Kennedy and worked with them there, although a couple of them visited with me out here socially. But the vast majority were looking for exposure and money and work and the right to sell their products and so on. Therefore, I met a fascinating group of people, accidental though it may have been. I didn't take the job to meet fascinating people. I was at that age where I thought I was fascinating. It turned out I was,
I have to ask, do we ever get past that age? Because I haven't gotten there yet.
yeah, I've gotten my toe out of the circle. Uh,
Oh,
Jim Irwin, the Apollo 15 fame. He's the one who first drove the lunar buggy on the moon. Left after he ceased being an astronaut. He started a church called Operation High Flight. He's one of the classiest guys I ever met. And although I met many, I met 100 astronauts that were on flight status. That doesn't mean they flew, and some of them never flew, but they were at least on flight status and ready to go in training. Of all of them, he was the finest man I met in that whole group of fine men and women. It was just an unbelievable environment. And unfortunately, I said all that to say this, unfortunately, he passed, I think in his 40s, way too young. And he probably could contributed as much or more than anyone that was ever in the space program. He was just a magical person and good to his core. Uh, so I made a few exceptions. Charlie Manson, the astronauts, and whoever else I said. There were a few that probably didn't come because that wasn't our relationship. But all of them are really neat people, and that's one of the reasons for moving up in an organization or in your career, what have you. The people you come in contact with, the people that enable you to meet, and then you don't leave that to chance. You lean in. When I walk into a room and there are other people in there, many people are fascinating. I'll probably never find out about because they haven't done anything that got a headline or they were shy or humble or something. But if there's an interesting person who's known to be an interesting person in the room, I seek them out. Somebody asked one time, I forget who it was, but somebody semi-famous said, am I going to get to meet Ben Gay? And whoever it was said to them, when he finds out you're in the room, he will come to you. So that was Danny Cox, my old friend, who was the sonic boom salesman. That meant he was he was a Air Force pilot, and it was his job, in addition to testing airplanes and so on, to go to the communities they flew over and did the sonic boom and cracked an occasional window and hold meetings with the community and in schools to let them know that it was actually a good idea they were breaking their windows because of the benefits that came from protecting the nation. But the sonic boom salesman. But he said to me one day, remind me what I just told you about, if Ben Gay knows you're in the room, he'll find you. Danny said to me one day, because he had the little man's fighter pilot complex, he said, Ben, do you know how you can tell if there's a fighter pilot in the room with you? And I said, no, how? He said, he will tell you. And because of Danny, I found that to be true. If there was a fighter
Really?
pilot, so oh yeah, there was a fighter pilot somewhere in the room. He or she, there was a few she's, would introduce themselves and then quickly say, I don't know if Danny told you or not, but I'm a fighter pilot. And I said, no, but he
Oh,
told me that I would meet you. He said, really? They didn't know I was talking generically,
right,
that
right.
if there was a fighter pilot in the room, they would tell me, and they did.
Oh, and I'm going, right when you were saying that, I just flashed to Top Gun Maverick. It's really one of my all-time favorite movies, and I'm not a movie buff, but when Tom Cruise, and I can't remember who he was talking to, it's like, he said, I'm a pilot. That's who I am. That's how he identified.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Not as a man, not as a, he wasn't a parent, but there were so many other things he could have identified, but he was a pilot at his core, and that's all there was to it.
Well,
I
whoever
think
wrote
I
that
think he was
script,
talking to Ice, Val Kilmer, I think, but
I never saw the movie, I'm
oh,
ashamed
you've
to say.
got to go see it. It's we saw it. I had never seen the first one, and when Top Gun Maverick came out last year, to whatever it was, I had friends over, and we're having a big old, gathering over here, and somebody said, "Is anybody going to go see Top Gun Maverick?" And I went, "No," and it was out that weekend, so we rented it out. Rented up the first one and put it on the TV. I've got a giant TV, and we watched that. I said, "That's pretty good." So let's all go. So we all took the day off. It was a Monday. We all took the day and we went to a matinee. Thank goodness we were the only ones there. Ben, when we came out, none of us could speak a word. We were without speech.
Hmm.
It's an amazing movie.
If you were without speech, somebody should have put down a brass plaque and say, on this spot,
I'm
Denise
telling
Griffith.
your wife, you're being mean to me. I'm going to take a snip and send it to her, and she'll tell you to stop being mean to Denise. But it's true. I'm rarely without speech, so I was that day.
Well, next week we will cover whatever you want, but my list says that we pick up with Bill Gove, one of the founders of the modern speaking day industry, along with Cavett Robert. And
Now that
Bill,
one I know. I know him.
Cavett and I and Wade Cannon, who's also on the list, uh, began the National Speakers
I know.
Association
NSA. Yep.
because they called me drunk in a, not drunk, but I could tell they'd been drinking
They were
from
happy.
yeah, from a bar and a hotel to announce they had started the National Speakers Association, that I was one of the three charter members, and that we were each going to put in $50, which today would be about 500. So it was worth discussing. And then it turned out what Cabot was putting in was, as a lawyer, his talent. He would form the company, et cetera, but put no money in. So Wade Cannon and I started the National Speakers Association with $100 in the bank account.
My friend Jim Tenney was the president there for a while.
Yeah, it was a
And I
lot of,
think he took over right after Jeannie Roberts, one of the funniest women you'll ever listen to, ever. But they're both gone now.
There again, we'll add to the list of people I know that are dead.
Right. Right. Yeah, it happens to us all. I guess what we need to be paying attention to is who we're paying attention to, how we're
Absolutely.
paying attention to them. Get out of your own way and start listening and watching and figuring out who needs to be in your inner circle, whether that inner circle means you never meet them, but you meet them on a podcast, or like you and I, we talk every Wednesday, and sometimes before that, your inner circle are the people that you invite in, and you invite them in for very valid reasons.
Absolutely. And you watch the door. I'll let
Yeah.
anybody uh, in the very, very beginning, but the clock in my head is already ticking because it's just, I've reached that age where I have to count the minutes, hours, days, weeks, months that I spend with someone. When I was 20, I would have spent a lot of time with anybody who'd talk to me. Now I don't have a lot of, in the golfing world. I started playing the back nine several years ago. I'm probably on the 17th hole now, I'm guessing. I'm much more cautious, but I wish I'd been more cautious earlier because I wasted a lot of time that could have been better spent messing with people who weren't going anywhere.
All right. I understand
Can
that.
can I take 2 minutes for another quick story that chatting just reminded me of?
Yeah, go.
I went to Atlanta to do a big seminar for somebody. It might have been for ourselves, but anyway, a group of people in Atlanta that I went to high school with heard I was coming. And although a lot of them I hadn't had any contact with in years, and some of them I didn't remember, to tell you the truth. But 15 or 20 of my classmates came to the seminar. I left word at the door. If they said they're from Murphy High School, let them in. And among them was an old friend who will remain nameless because his wife may still be alive. I know he's gone, but I recognized him immediately. And I said, Dave, called his name. How are you? He says, I'm fine. He said, I didn't know if you'd speak to me or not. I said, why wouldn't I speak to you? He said, well, you've gone on and you've done well. I said, David, I've used his name twice now, first name. I said, we're buddies. He says, okay. I just didn't want to infringe on your time. And so I said, no.
Oh,
I said, what's going on in your life? He said, well, I got a big promotion. I said, what's that? And he said, well, I work at Kraft Foods, as you may know. I didn't, but I said, okay. And I said, what was the promotion? He said, I got promoted from the mayonnaise vat over to the mustard vat. And
oh.
I'm looking at him thinking, I don't know how to react to that.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't even know what I would say. I would just, well, that's great for you.
Yeah,
Good for
exactly.
you.
I said, it's all right. Well, I'm
If
happy
he
to hear that.
liked it, yeah, if he was
Yeah.
happy
And
about it.
I said, what, what's the benefit to you besides obviously more money? Because you said promoted. And he said, well, the mustard doesn't stick to your paddle.
Oh my gosh.
And I thought, yeah, that was my reaction. I thought, well, success comes in all shapes, sizes, and forms.
Yeah, little wins. You got to take them where they land.
But I was speechless. I mean, I went in, I said, I babbled something about how happy I was for him and so on. But Gigi, whenever we're kidding about something in that general family area, I'll say, honey, remember, I was promoted to the mustard vat.
See, now you're just being mean.
Well, I hate to throw
It's
things like
funny.
that in her face, but
Yeah, it's funny though. The things that we hear all along. I was telling my best friend Maggie over the weekend, I don't remember my childhood until I was about 10. And I was looking around here, there, and yonder over the weekend, and I guess that's not an unusual thing. I used to think that I just didn't have a childhood, that I was raised by aliens, which, by the way, is entirely possible. I'm not convinced that that didn't happen. But, and we got to talking about the different oddball things that we've heard or witnessed, people we've never seen before then or after, but they're still in our heads.
Hmm.
It's amazing what'll stick with you, and I guess it's going to be not the mustard. I don't know, but it's interesting how you pick these things up and they become part of your lexicon, so to speak.
Well, as always, it has been a joy to talk to you. I hope our listeners got something out of it. And remember, no matter what it sounds like, 99% of the things we talk about are relatable to sales.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the interesting people that I've met were career building contacts, and they were not accidental. If you're an interesting person or have a fascinating story to tell, and I get wind of it, and we're ever in the same room together, ladies and gentlemen, you and I will meet,
And see, I met you many years ago, and I'm thankful every day for that.
and vice versa.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Well, listen, everybody, thank you for being with us here today and every Wednesday. We appreciate you tuning into this episode of the Closers Inner Circle podcast, hosted by your partner in Success Radio. That's me. And if you enjoyed what you heard, please consider subscribing, rating, and leaving a review on your favorite podcast platform. Why? Because your support helps us reach more listeners and create even better content. Ben, I will see you next week. Have a terrific day.
Same to you. Have a wonderful one.
Me, you know what? I'm planning it. I'm going to go do it right now. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.